Hey guys, welcome to an all-new bonus round here on GameTrailers. I'm Jeff Keighley, and this month is the month we've all been counting down to the launch of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, so we're going to get right into conversation about both those systems, and we've assembled an awesome panel for that. The first bonus round in 2006 started with two of our guests, Michael Pachter and Jason Rubin. Great to have you guys.
Long time ago.
A long time ago, we were debating the PlayStation 3 launch, so we thought we'd bring you guys back.
I remember 2006 because you were in your 20s, you were in your 30s, and I was still in my 50s. Okay. I don't get it. I don't understand that.
But you weren't the internet legend that you are today.
Exactly.
It was a $600 PlayStation 3 launch, remember?
That's $599.
$599. So we were talking about something that thankfully we won't have to talk about again today.
Exactly. There is lots of other stuff to talk about. We've also got Seamus Blackley with us. Of course, known for his involvement in the original Xbox and building that at Microsoft, and now got a new company, Innovative Leisure. It's great to have you on the panel.
Thanks, man.
Because you know a little bit about these consoles.
I learned a thing or two.
So let's get right into it. I mean, we are a week away from the launch of the PlayStation 4. Xbox comes a week later. We want to talk specifically about those platforms, but also look at sort of the state of the industry and where we are now with these new launches. So, gamers on this site, on the internet, are so excited about these new systems, wondering, which one's going to be better, which one should I buy. Let's first tackle Sony, because, it was 6-7 years ago we talked about PlayStation 3 and the state of, as Jason said, $600 system, the Blu-ray player, the debate about moving to high definition. You guys sort of
cell processor, the complication of working on that hardware was very different than what they're launching now, which is much more similar to the PC or the Xbox. So it was a very different time.
So Sony stepping into it this Friday with PlayStation 4. Michael, let's start with you. I mean, is Sony poised for victory here?
Sony learned two huge lessons last cycle, and they didn't repeat their mistakes. One was don't launch a year behind, and the other was don't launch at a higher price point than your competitor.
Right.
So the biggest surprise for me this year is that Sony priced at $400 and Microsoft priced at $500.
Right.
And Sony is really well positioned to dominate. I mean, they're going to do great as long as they have a $100 price advantage, because $100 matters, should matter to almost every consumer. Yeah. And I think the boxes are sufficiently similar, and the software lineup is going to be sufficiently similar, at least until Titanfall comes out, that I think that $100 is going to make the difference in many consumers' purchase decision.
But Jason, let me ask you from perspective of a developer and a gamer, is the leap going to be enough? Because I talk to a lot of gamers now that say, hey, a lot of the big games I want to play this year, Assassin's, Call of Duty, I can play them on my Xbox or my PlayStation 3. There's some cool new games, but we're not going from standard definition to high definition. Many years ago, you gave a talk about the diminishing returns of graphics.
Right.
Do you think, is the leap there? Are you feeling it that people are going to want to upgrade this year?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. This is the longest time a console cycle has gone before a new launch.
Yep.
And I think it's long in the tooth. I mean, when we were sitting around talking about the last generation launch, there was no iPhone.
Right.
It never come out. Think of what that's done to the world, right? So much has changed. We need this refresh. I think it'll be an extremely strong launch compared to old launches, just based on the fact that so many of the real diehard console players have been waiting for a long time to get a new console.
Yep.
And so I think out of the gates we'll do very well. Both of them will do well. After that, as we look down the road, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because we do have now alternate game platforms. We have iPads, they're getting more powerful every year, that will have controllers this year, and they have AirPlay to the TV, so there's no real difference between that and a console. They're less powerful, to be clear, but over time will become more powerful. We'll refresh annually. I think we'll have a very strong launch to this next generation, but whether that carries through for the 8 years, 7 years that this generation has gone, and they see the numbers in the end that we're seeing now, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that'll happen.
No, and that's an interesting point. Seamus, building the Xbox, the idea of kind of building one system that sort of is this standard for a number of years, that sort of everyone programs to and gets better at, the games get better over time. Do you think, are we going to see that this generation, or are we going to move more towards like a cell phone model where they're going to be gradual upgrades? You have things like Valve talking about the Steam box. You're going to be able to sort of change out the hardware as you want. Is the idea of sort of one box that's going to be the same for 6 years, is that an antiquated way of looking at the business?
It probably is. I think that the thing that was really clear to me, even in like 1999, was that this was not a technological game. And I think that the clearest way maybe of looking at tablets and iOS and the explosion of mobile games is to see that it really is true, that the platform doesn't matter. People will play what the best game is, and if the platform is capable of playing that game, then they'll buy the game, and you can make a great business on it. It really is about the content. And I think that everything about the technology follows that as opposed to the other way around. And it's really confusing if you try to frame questions about what's going to happen in the context of technology.
Right.
Because I don't think consumers really care about that, and only a small percentage of them really even knew what the technology was in the first place. They know what game they want to play.
Yeah.
And if that plays on an iOS platform, then that's where the business will be. So I think that it's important to look at consoles as a class of gaming, as a genre of gaming, more than as a technology sort of a situation. It's not that we have to make these games that push all these technology bars. It's rather that people really want to play games in the living room. You see what happened with Ouya and the response to that, and the enthusiasm around these launches. That's not based on people wanting to see more technological tricks or any idea that consumers have about how fast hardware will upgrade and refresh and all of that kind of stuff that we think about. Our customers don't think about that. They think about, I want to play an awesome game. Okay, and I think that at the end of the day, from a Sony Microsoft standpoint, as Michael said, the most important lesson that Sony learned was to be responsive in that way. And if they can be responsive in that way and provide that content, they'll do well. But I think anytime you start to think about this like a technology situation, or anytime you try to think about how technology is going to affect somebody's winning or losing, you get into a crazy rat hole situation where nothing makes sense, because it's a content business, and it's more clear than ever before.
The consoles that we're playing now are 7, 8 years old.
Right.
The tablets that are coming out now and coming out shortly, it won't take long for the chipset to be able to do what 7-year-old consoles can do.
Right.
We're getting controllers this year. Apple's announced the spec. Android tablets have controllers. We already are able to play on the TV wirelessly from our tablet.
Right.
If somebody can have a tablet that they already own with a controller projecting on their TV in 2 years, playing PS3 and Xbox 360 quality games, will a number of, not everyone watching this show, because this is the hardest core that wants the absolute best, but will the average person care to spend the extra money on a separate console, or will they simply bring the tablet home, pick up the controller, turn on their TV, and play what are really good racing games already, will be fantastic, what are okay first-person shooters, but they don't have the controller. Once they have the controller, this generation of Call of Duty will be playable at home on your tablet. So 3 years from now, will the people that won't buy at $500, won't buy at $400, now they're looking at $300 or $200, will they simply not buy the console that they would have in the past because they have this tablet?
Right.
And that's the time where I think this console generation gets in trouble.
And what's important, I think, to the hardcore audience, to the esteemed audience of this fine show, is that the technology and the production values that are going to be brought to super high-end console games that we all love are going to be driven by where the customers are. And so if we see the kinds of things that Jason's talking about, which I think he's correct about, if we see devices that are capable of playing that content, that are maybe more ubiquitous, that are multi-purpose, that are around the house anyway, then you're going to start to see investment in content for those devices as opposed to for consoles. And that's really the challenge that Sony and Microsoft have right now, is keeping that content creation economy on their platform. And that's going to be the interesting thing to watch, because where the great games are is where the audience is, and the games that look the best and play the best and have the most innovation, have the most technology, have the most online functionality, that's all going to be where the audience is. And that's driven purely by, where people want to play those games and what devices they work on.
Yet, you're predicting, big numbers for...
So let me tell you why you guys are both
over
right.
a lifetime.
You guys are both right, and you're both wrong. And I think everything you said is exactly right. I mean, I really do. But I think that in the narrowly defined context of what is a console and what's that market, there were 250 million consoles sold in the last cycle, total, between the Wii and the PS3 and the Xbox 360. There are 2.5 billion internet households, or people on the internet. There are 1.5 billion people with cell phones and soon tablets. So the addressable market for what you're talking about, which is this easy to play mobile game that can be broadcast on your TV, is 2.5 billion people. It's gigantic. So you're right, that talent will migrate toward that. That's going to happen. But the market for consoles is a much smaller market, 10% as big as the internet market. And that's where the super talented, really greedy, capitalist developers are going to migrate because they can make $50 million if they have Call of Duty as a hit.
What you're talking about, really, and
No, it's like the movie industry. I'm just saying that YouTube, more people have access to YouTube than to see Avatar in the
But
theater.
I think what you're really saying is that we have to take it up a level of abstraction, even further away from the technology. You know, that content is going to show up where there's a business model that supports it.
Totally.
Okay? Where
And
there
if
is- where
a
there is
developer
an
can make more
ecosystem
money, right? If a developer can make more
managed
money,
so they can make money.
if he can make
Hold
more
on.
money with the $2.5 billion addressable market, he's going to. I agree with you. That's why I said you're both right. But if he thinks he can make more money in the 250 million installed base console market, that's where he's going to go. And think about it like the movie industry and compare it to YouTube. Why is it that we don't have Avatar on YouTube? And unless it's pirated. But I mean, the reason we see Avatar in a theater in IMAX 3D is because James Cameron got $200 million to produce it, and that's where he's going to be, because the guys who have the money are going to make sure that that whole studio model works.
Well, there's a venue differentiation there. You go to a movie theater, you see it with your friends on a big screen, you have the popcorn, it's opening night.
But Avatar
there's no
made
difference
more.
between
Avatar made more money on DVD sales and sales in HBO and VOD than it did in the theater, for real. So I'm just saying that the marketplace is going to fragment that way. You're going to still have your console experience, which will be huge,
Right.
and you're going to have your more casual experiences, which are going to get better and better and better and closer to console quality. And the talent's going to kind of bridge the divide and go where the money is. And when the studio model collapses, when the publishers all go out of business, then I agree with you that we're going to do everything on our tablets, but that's going to be bad for everybody. This show will stop existing. There won't be any money. Viacom won't pay your salary.
Right.
I won't get invited anymore. But I agree with you. And the other thing you said that is absolutely right is we have all observed over the last 30 years that every 5 years there's a console cycle, and every 5 years graphics are so much better. So you started this question with graphics aren't that much better this time. What do we do? But we always kind of forget the 5-year part. And as you said, this has been 7 and 8 years. Why do we buy new cars? We don't buy it because the new one's
Or a new
faster
iPhone,
than the old one. Or, and why do we get a new TV? Oh, because it's a 60-inch instead of 55. Who cares? It's the same broadcasting. You buy a new TV and a new car because you're tired of your old one. And as it happens, we change TVs and we change cars about every 7 years. That's the average time people own a car. Guess what? It's time to get a frickin' new console. So I think it's going to be because people are ready, and you said that.
What often happens is that someone says something in these panels, and the other person says, what you said is this. Is not, neither one of us, I believe, said anything about this console failing or consoles going
you
away.
Said it's time to buy a new one. I said you're absolutely
It is
right.
absolutely time to
I
buy
agree
a
with
new
you.
one, and I said it will be a stronger launch than we're used to.
And you said content's going to migrate to free-to-play mobile stuff, and I
No,
agree
no,
with
no,
that
I
too.
did- no one
you said
mentioned
when we get
free-to-play.
well,
What I
whatever the
said-
model. Sorry.
Hold on. Let me clarify what I
Whatever
said.
the model is, paid download.
What I said is the first years will be very strong. If you compare this tablet today to an Xbox One or a PS4, it's night and day difference. But consoles, this 250 million units of consoles that you mentioned, was over 7 years. In the first few years, consoles will be as strong as they ever have been. I agree with you there. What I'm asking is what will happen in the 4th and 5th year, where 4 or 5 Android tablet refreshes from today.
Right.
And every time we get a new Android tablet, the power goes up incredibly. What happens at that point if the console does not improve and it's
So what I think
it's
happens-
the tail end
what I
of this
think happens-
generation becomes a big deal.
What I think happens is I think you're going to see library content. So I think you're going to see PS1 and PS2 games
tons of library
on
content.
mobile,
And
on
PS3.
tablet, right, and probably PS3 games. And I think that they'll manage that so it's sort of like Netflix. Netflix doesn't get brand new movies on streaming. They only get stuff that's a year or 2 years old. It'll be windowed, and it's the way the studios preserve their ability to sell new
Here's
movies.
the challenge with that. Tablet games sell in a different fashion and work best in a different fashion, or have shown to, than console games. So simply porting an old console game and charging $49, $39, $29, whatever they decide,
$6
may not work. So I do believe new content will come out for these consoles.
too.
It will be made for the tablet console. It will be made specifically for them, and it will be impressive and different than what we had on PS2.
But is that
and
going to
PS3.
take market share from these consoles?
This
That's what we're
year?
getting at.
No.
It's like-
2, 3, 4 years from now, I think.
You're saying yes, and Patrick, you're saying no, right? There's still going to be that.
Market share. This is
I
not a
think
battle of hardware. This is a battle of business models.
It expands
the hardware.
the market. So the answer is yes, but the market gets bigger. So the point is that 20 years ago, the market consisted only of PC and console, and it was essentially
You keep
full
on-
paid
you-
games.
You keep on going back to the market, and that's where it is.
No,
you know?
the market was small 20 years ago. It was
Understood,
PC
but-
and console. The market today is console, mobile, and this broad free to
It's
play
huge.
or download 2.5 billion addressable market where it used to be 25 million. So 25 million grew to 250. 250 will probably stay there, and the rest of the market will grow from 400 million people to 2.5 billion people. I think the
So what does that mean to the gamers? Does that mean that they're going to now
overall market's going to be significantly bigger. It's going to be dominated by free-to-play, paid download, tablet, mobile games. But the console market's going to remain healthy because it's just like saying the movie theater market is suffering because we have TV. It's not.
No,
It stayed in place,
The danger
and
is
TV
you
expanded
yourself
the
brought
market.
Up the danger there. You yourself brought up the danger. It's a marketplace, and it's now a fragmented marketplace. There's a market, okay, of gamers who want to buy games, and that's ever expanding, okay? And in fact, I think a lot of hardcore gamers are feeling a little bit threatened in a weird way because suddenly all of these these sort of unwashed, unclean new gamers, right, who will play games that a hardcore gamer would never be seen to be playing, right, are carrying away the majority of the business, and that's taking focus. Okay, from the people who make games and who run the ecosystems that fund the making of those games away from the kinds of games they want to play. This is a battle of business models, okay? The hardware is a MacGuffin. The hardware does not matter. Like the PS4 and the Xbox 360 and their specs, it doesn't matter. This is a race to see who can build the best business model to make it profitable to make games on those platforms. And right now, the biggest advantage the consoles have over Google, over Amazon, over Apple, et cetera, is that those companies are not entirely focused on this. They will if the business continues to grow, and they're trying to be, okay? But Microsoft and Sony are laser focused on it. Can they win, with that marketplace as opposed to other marketplaces? And that's really the battle here. And the content is going to exactly follow that.
It's easy to get labeled anti-console. I'm not anti-console. It's easy to get labeled. I am, and I'm also, by the way, at various times I've been called a Nintendo fanboy, a Microsoft fanboy. So I am a game fanboy.
Right.
I love the game industry.
Great
I
concept.
love everything about games. Up until now, if you've wanted to play a harder core game, you're either on PC or console.
Right.
I fundamentally believe that will change
Right.
in the next 3 to 5 years. And a lot of the hardcore gamers that are watching this that would never stoop to playing Candy Crush or whatever it is that isn't a hardcore game will find that the Candy Crush devices
Right.
are attracting them with totally hardcore, completely cool, amazing games. And things will get a lot more complicated. I'm not saying, I've never said consoles will disappear. I don't think PC will disappear.
Right.
I think PC is going to
There's
go
a
through another
feedback
heyday.
effect there too.
But
When
there's
that-
going to be a lot of confusion that hasn't been there in the past.
Jason, when the Candy Crush player has their Candy Crush device, okay, and through the Facebook game mechanism or whatever mechanism they get advertised to, sees some kind of more mid-core or hardcore game, like, oh, this is
They're
awesome.
moving up. It's
We're
great.
building them into a consumer that's going to
That's
end up
exactly what I'm
helping
talking
the
about.
hardcore and the console.
It's
So
right.
all
It's
of this
all
stuff
good
feeds
for
back.
gaming.
Right.
None of it is bad. And I have a huge collection of vintage arcade games. Okay, and so when I think about the context of all this, I always look way back to the beginning of the first time that pixels were drawn on a screen that weren't Archie Bunker, right? And there was a transition between the arcade and the home console that happened that was really, really, really powerful, right? And we think about it in these rickety old terms like the Atari 2600 and the first Nintendo systems and all of that. But what that was really about was a compelling form of entertainment that you could only get at the grocery store or an arcade. Okay, you had to go somewhere, there was this big machine, you put quarters in, and it was super awesome, and it was social, and it was all of those things, and it was a huge business, right? I think Asteroids in 1979 was a $4 billion business, in 1979 dollars. By the way, all in cash, okay?
I know, but the day that John Lennon was killed, I was playing Asteroids when I heard it. I was at a pizza parlor, and they told it while I was playing Asteroids. And trust me, I'm about $250 million.
But did you finish the game? But no. But
no, of course not.
The trick here is that there's a sea change, that content then became available on a new device, okay, which was in your home. And suddenly, the marketplace, which had been awesome and growing quickly, became enormous, right? And there was a total sea change. Did the people who owned that content react in a reasonable way? Not really, but they didn't know how to react in a reasonable way. Okay, the sea change that we see right now to mobile devices is very, very similar, right? You have suddenly a really convenient way to get that content, and in fact, we've given permission to a whole group of people who never felt they had permission to be gamers before, to be gamers, and we're going to see that continuously evolve. And we're all chasing that. All of the cash that's going to be spent on development and spent on making super high quality content is going to follow where those gamers choose to play stuff. And Jason was very prescient when he gave his talks about graphics not mattering a decade ago. it really doesn't matter, especially as we reach the asymptotic limit right now of hardware, right? You know, there is a certain amount of stuff that can be drawn. The thing that's starting to matter, the thing that starts to matter is the content itself and the art and how it gets used. You know, the difference between a PlayStation 4 game and an Xbone game is going to have a lot more to do with the quality of the art staff than any hardware concern. Okay, and the way that gets presented to the consumer is going to have to do with the way the marketplace works and the way the advertising works and how healthy that ecosystem is. And that is the real thing. You know, it's like looking at World War II. You know, oh, you know, the Germans had better weapons and the Americans had better weapons. No, the Americans had a better economy, okay? And at the end of the day, that's what mattered. And at the end of the day, you know, whether or not the consoles can cough up an economy that can beat Apple is going to be an interesting thing to watch.
So if I'm Sony, to wrap up this section, what do I do
Is this
then?
the second question you've asked? I like that.
This is great.
That means we have another 30 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
No, but this is a
Are you getting
fascinating
half paid
conversation.
today?
No, I think it's fascinating though to talk about this, because if I'm Sony then, and all these things you guys are talking about, I think everyone agrees, like, oh, that's starting to happen. What do I do? Is Sony prepared in the right way?
I'm glad you asked. I actually think that they're not. I think Sony might move away from this with Kaz as the CEO, but Sony has had this problem of living in the past,
Right.
where in the 80s we all bought a Sony TV and a Sony VCR and a Sony stereo because we weren't sure if other components would work together because we didn't get it. It was all new.
Right.
And they lost that edge. You know, now we'll have a Samsung TV and a Denon stereo and, you know, whatever. And I think Sony still thinks they can build that brand back. So I think they're still fixated on selling your Bravia 3D, you know, LED smart TV.
Right.
And I think that they're so fixated on that, they're not going to adapt. They still think that the Vita has a life and is a realistic part of the gaming ecosystem. It's not. And Microsoft, I think, is not at all thinking about cross-selling other products. I think they're focused on being a more integral part of media consumption in the home, and they're going in that direction.
They've got a backup plan. They have the Surface. So if it turns out that people want to have their console be mobile, they have a Surface. It's an utter failure. No one would hide that.
Right.
But they're putting a lot of, I mean, they have untold resources to put
Sony
behind
has
it.
the Xperia, but
And
It
that
just
will-
doesn't-
That may
it
become
doesn't-
more important in their future.
But how many of us honestly think about the brand of our television when we're on our iPad? You know, you don't feel like you have to go.
We still think about the brand of our pad, and it's interesting.
No, of course.
That you know that.
But it's an independent decision, is what I'm
But you know,
saying.
but it's all cyclical. I think that we're thinking about the brand of that tablet in the same way now that we were thinking about the brand of the television back then, right? People definitely know. You ask somebody what operating system they have on their phone, they know that. Think about that. They
Right.
know what
It's crazy.
operating system they
Yeah,
have
it's
on their
crazy.
phone. That's pretty awesome, right? But that's that marketplace again. And again, you know, you can build that into something important or not.
Having worked at Sony and actually watched how Sony has been over the years, I think first of all, and we did already, but we have to give them an incredible amount of credit for this launch.
Right.
Inside the industry, quietly, hush hush, 2 years ago, Microsoft was going to win this generation, right?
yeah.
Yep.
And that's not the case now.
Right.
Right? They have been very, very smart, very, very adept at changing their policies to fit what gamers wanted, and they've created an incredible hardware.
Yeah.
The creator of that hardware, Mark Cerny, who I know extremely well, could not have done this with the PS3 era because Ken Kutaragi was there, and the entire company had a very different way of looking at things.
Right.
I actually know better than most people the history of internal hardware production at Sony because I went through this with Mark from Crash, watching how hardware's gone. The change from the Kutaragi model to, I will call it the Cerny model,
For sure.
is far larger than anyone realizes. It is looking at the market and adapting to the market rather than creating the ultimate graphic hardware from a technical standpoint and assuming the market will come. It is a seed change. So I would not underestimate Sony's ability to change now that they have a person in Mark Cerny and obviously the people that put Mark Cerny in that place who are willing to change. And I think we have to give them that credit. Looking at Sony's past is not useful here because it's a radically different company internally, and we see that in the success that they've had in the last
I
year.
think that's true. That's true of Microsoft as well. I should point out something really interesting
Absolutely.
here, which I've been thinking about a lot. One of the things that we're restoring in our game restoration efforts is actually one of Mark's first games, if not his first game, which was one of the first, if not the first, touchscreen game called Quack. So I think that the irony of like having this
Marvel Madness.
no, it's way before then. It was a touchscreen game, like a tile arranging game.
He was 6 years old when he built it.
No, he was 17. There's a great video of him where he actually says, in Mark Cerny's very understated and very humble way, that this is going to change all games forever. He was saying this, and he was like 17. But it's an awesome kind of touchscreen game. It's a touchscreen game on a monitor, and so you get like static electricity on your finger. It's a very strange thing, but it's a touchscreen game. And here we are in this world where you have Mark, steering the ship for Sony in ostensibly a battle against touchscreen devices to try to figure out who's going to win this contest. And I think that you always come around cyclically to the same place that you were. But Microsoft is a very different place to the way that it has been in the past as well. And I think that these companies have an internal mechanism going on and an external face that's going on, right? And within Sony, I think you're exactly right. I've seen very clearly that the impetus internally is entirely about content, entirely about games, driven by Mark in a way that Sony hasn't been able to for more than a decade to be entirely about that, and it's super impressive. And when Microsoft made missteps in their messaging and the way that they presented themselves to gamers, not the way they presented themselves certainly to the business world and to investors, but to the gamer, Sony was able to step into it because of that internal change, right? And it's reflected in the culture that Don Matrick had been running inside of Microsoft, which was very much focused on the larger picture of entertainment, very much focused on the larger picture of how Xbox as a business could fit into a larger Microsoft content model, right? Yep. And when that got expressed through his organization, it got expressed really poorly, and it didn't really connect. Now he left. Now they've rejiggered everything internally, and they have a totally different kind of message coming out. And one of the things that's very, very true of the modern world, the very connected social media world, is that customers and consumers and fans are just as happy with you if you do things right as if you screw up but admit to it and change it. And Microsoft did a great job with that. And so it's an interesting horse race. And
but remember, the last time we were sitting together was at E3, and Microsoft had just dropped the ball, and Sony had just dropped the mic, and everyone was saying, it's over.
Right.
And I sat there and said, to incredible email negative response, it's not over. Microsoft can always change. And people go, absolutely, it's over, it's over, it's over. Right. And 48 hours later, Microsoft changed. So Microsoft has clearly also gotten the message.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there.
But the one important thing, the reason that they can change on a dime is
such a great
exactly
segue
what
there,
we were saying before. That the hardware doesn't matter, okay? The software policy matters, they could change that on a dime. Right. The operating system matters, they could change that on a dime. The developers and the software model they have, that can change on a dime. The billing model they have, that can change on a dime. Right. None of it's important. It's all gas. The only thing that's important is the way they conduct that business and how safe an ecosystem they make for investors to create content. That is all that matters in this generation.
All right, and we'll leave it on that note. This has been an awesome discussion. Next week we are back talking more about Microsoft and what they are doing with the Xbox One. So stick around.